You know, one of the big Achilles heels of many politicians is that when they're among kindred spirits, they seem free to let loose, show their true colors, and expose their seemingly infinite hypocrisy. So it's not surprising, but it is still fun to see former senator and former vice president and eternal leftist weather vane Joe Biden tell a friendly Democrat crowd in New Hampshire that he wants to see dastardly fossil fuel executives thrown in jail, never bothering to mention that his own son has his own troubling role as, yeah, you got it, a fossil fuel executive in Ukraine. Hi everyone, I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRC-TV, and welcome to 2020. We're rocketing into the future together. And, well, you know, even as we pass into the future, I know a lot of us are probably still pretty darn interested in history. In fact, even probably prehistory. If you're like me, you might be curious about dinosaurs. And if you're like me and you are curious about dinosaurs, then you probably know that Joe Biden recently trod the earth in leftist Peterborough, New Hampshire, where he wandered into a barb-laden 10-minute monologue about the horrors of so-called anthropogenic climate change.
If we don't stop using fossil fuels,
we're all dead.
But have no fear, because Joe and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are ready to hit Omaha Beach in this, as AOC said, our World War II. And Joe has a big, authoritarian, fascistic plan to handle that, even though he cites no evidence that the planet is warming due to man-made carbon emissions. What's his idea?
You have to set sort of guide rails down now. So between the years 2021 and 2030, it's irreversible, the path we've set ourselves on. And one of which is doing away with any subsidies for fossil fuels, number one.
Which is really poorly phrased and highly confusing, but what I take from it is that Joe Biden is using the soft language of most U.S. politicians who promote economic fascism. In other words, it's the idea that you'll be allowed to own a business in name only while the government tells you how it will be run, while the government sets sort of guide rails down, as Joe said. Then there's the kicker, which shows how willing Biden is to employ even more tricky tactics and the jackbooted force of the state to demonize people and crush human industry.
Number two, holding them liable for what they have done, particularly in those cases where you're underserved neighborhoods and you know the deal, okay? And by the way, when they don't, or when they're deliberate, put them in jail. That's what I'm not joking about this. I'm not joking about this.
Okay, we'll get to his son in a moment, but before we do that, I think it's useful to note that like most leftist politicians, Biden is far too willing to replace real tort law with a pseudo state-based concept of finding people liable, attacking them, and then raking in billions of dollars, which will go, of course, to the government rather than to anybody who's actually been harmed by anything. See, liability is supposed to be reserved for person-on-person tortious injury. And since the state is not a person, it can't claim injury. This has been well explained by Eric Helland and Alex Tabarrok in their book called Judge and Jury, American Tort Law on Trial. But one suspects that Joe Biden's been too busy telling members of the Council on Foreign Relations all about his wonderful Ukrainian gamesmanship to bother reading the book. Or perhaps he got so caught up in the friendly atmosphere at leftist Peterborough, New Hampshire, that he just simply forgot to mention that the current concept of government liability suits against businesses and individuals runs completely counter to history, to tradition, to hundreds of years of tort law tradition. Goodness knows he certainly forgot to mention that his desire to throw fossil fuel executives into the clink would see his own son Hunter rounded up for his strange 5-year buco bucks stint with Burisma Holdings, the largest energy corporation in Ukraine. Or perhaps Joe knows that his own son would be protected if he were ever to institute such a plan about these executives. Biden seems to be, just like so many other politicians, one of these guys who operates under the do as I say, not as I do motto. But we don't have that ability. We have to operate under the we're going to get hit one more time. Businesses are going to get slammed. Businesses will be demonized, and only the ones who have special connections will be able to squeak away from the government and its ever more troubling steamroll power over free individuals. Well, we used to be free. We can still hope to become freer in the future, even as we look at the dinosaurs who trod the earth and tell us about wanting to jail energy company executives who deal in fossil fuels. Hey, thanks so much for watching, and don't forget, like and subscribe if you have the opportunity. Tell your friends about us, and yes, indeed, head on over to MRC-Store to find this great shirt, In Search of Real News, and many more. It says Media Research Center on the back, and I love this shirt. It reminds me of the old In Search of TV show with Leonard Nimoy, and perhaps a little bit of Fox Mulder thrown in there. So thanks so much for watching, everybody. Don't forget, like and subscribe, share with friends, and don't forget to comment too. I always like to read what people have to say, and I try to exchange some ideas with folks. A lot of great ideas coming in the comments. For MRC TV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.